The Voynich Manuscript. Picture a candlelit library tucked inside the Villa Mondragone, just outside Rome. It's 1912. Dust hangs in the air. Shelves groan with forgotten knowledge. That's where a rare book dealer named Wilfred Voynich opens a bundle of old manuscripts and freezes. One book doesn't behave like the others. Its pages are covered in a script no one recognizes. No Greek, no Latin, no Arabic. Just looping symbols, flowing like a language that refuses to be named. And then there are the drawings. Strange plants that don't exist anywhere on Earth. Roots twisting into impossible shapes. Leaves arranged with unnatural symmetry. Charts of stars and rotating heavens. Circular diagrams that feel more like blueprints than art. But the most unsettling images are human. Mostly women. Nude figures immersed in winding tubes, pools, and chambers. Connected systems that look disturbingly biological. One large foldout shows a branching network that mirrors the human lymphatic system. A system that science wouldn't fully map for centuries. Another section appears to trace fetal development, stage by stage, long before embryology was even a discipline. The pages themselves tell another story. Carbon dating places the parchment in the early 1400s. This book is old, undeniably old, and yet the knowledge inside it feels ahead of its time. Over the years, the world's sharpest minds took their turn. Linguists, historians, military codebreakers from both world wars. Every attempt failed. More recently, artificial intelligence was brought in. It detected structure, repetition, syntax, statistical balance, exactly what you'd expect from a real language. But no known language on Earth matches it. It isn't random, and it isn't fake. That's when the story gets quieter and stranger. Requests for ultra-detailed scans were denied. Advanced spectral testing proposals vanished without explanation. A handful of researchers claimed their access was suddenly revoked after suggesting the text might not be human in origin. One academic said he'd uncovered a hidden cipher in the botanical section. Shortly after, his paper disappeared. His position followed. The manuscript wasn't just unreadable. It was guarded, which raises a dangerous question. If this book truly encodes advanced biology, reproduction, and cosmic alignment, then either human history is missing an entire chapter, or the knowledge came from somewhere else. Why would a medieval manuscript depict organs only visible with modern instruments? Why do its star charts hint at observations that seem to require telescopes? And if the Voynich manuscript wasn't written for us, then who was it meant for? Because the next forbidden invention suggests the same impossible truth, that our past knew far more than we're comfortable admitting. The Vedas Atomic Hymn. Imagine the northern plains of the Indian subcontinent more than 3,000 years ago. No laboratories, no instruments, no written books, only fire rituals beneath open skies and voices. Around 1500 BCE, sages known as rishis composed the Vedas, hymns preserved through perfect memorization, passed from mind to mind long before ink touched parchment. Among them, the Rigveda speaks of cosmic order, elemental forces, and battles between light and darkness. But hidden between its verses is something far more unsettling. A description of matter that sounds uncomfortably modern. Later philosophical texts, the Upanishads, introduce terms like anu and paramanu. Not symbols, not metaphors. They are described as the smallest possible units of existence. Indivisible, invisible, yet responsible for everything that forms. In other words, atoms. The texts go further. They explain how these particles combine, separate, and interact through unseen forces. Reality, they say, is vibrational. Not poetic vibration, but literal oscillation. An ancient concept called spanda describes existence itself as a constant pulse, a foundational movement beneath all matter. Light and sound are portrayed as traveling energies, moving through layered levels of reality. Different frequencies, different densities. The universe, according to these hymns, is not solid, it's structured. Matter is divided into 5 subtle elements: ether, air, fire, water, and earth. Not as primitive substances, but as stages of energetic condensation. It's a framework that eerily parallels modern ideas of energy fields and states of matter. When European scholars first translated these verses in the 1800s, they waved it away. Symbolism, religious imagination. But as atomic theory matured and quantum mechanics rewrote the rules of physics, some scientists quietly revisited those ancient lines. Niels Bohr himself expressed fascination with Indian metaphysics. Still, curiosity stopped where institutions began. Research proposals exploring Vedic atomic thought were denied. Departments cited a lack of empirical basis, despite rarely engaging the original Sanskrit. A few scholars pushed further, suggesting these sages may have used advanced cognitive disciplines rather than physical tools. Their careers stalled. Papers were rejected. Invitations disappeared. One comparative study from the late 1980s, linking Upanishadic particle theory with early Greek atomism, was quietly removed from multiple libraries. Catalog records later claimed it was never there. So the question remains, if these atomic insights weren't coincidence, then the story of science doesn't begin in modern Europe. It begins under stars, in stillness, guided by minds trained to observe inward rather than outward. What kind of perception allows someone to see the building blocks of reality without ever seeing them? And if knowledge like this once existed, what else did ancient consciousness access that we've since forgotten? The Dendera light. Deep in Upper Egypt, inside the temple of Hathor at Dendera, there's a chamber most visitors never see. The air is still. The stone walls press close. And carved into the rock are images that don't behave like hieroglyphs should. At first glance, you recognize the familiar lotus flowers, serpents, sacred symbols of life and rebirth. But then your eye locks onto something else. Long, oval shapes. Smooth. Encased. Each one cradles a snake-like form stretching from end to end. Below them, figures raise these objects using pillar-like stands. To a modern observer, the resemblance is unsettling. They look like giant light bulbs. This is what's become known as the Dendera light, one of the most controversial images in all of Egyptology. Orthodox scholars insist the meaning is symbolic. A lotus giving birth to a serpent. A visual metaphor for divine energy emerging from chaos. Case closed. Except, engineers didn't see symbolism. They saw hardware. Electrical specialists pointed out details that are hard to ignore. The pillars resemble insulators. Some figures appear to handle cables or conductive rods. The serpent inside the bulb mirrors the shape of a filament. And then there's the bigger problem: light. Many inner chambers of Egyptian temples, including Dendera and Abydos, are buried deep within massive stone complexes. Too deep, too winding, and yet the walls are pristine. No soot, no smoke stains, no residue from torches, oil lamps, or candles. When modern researchers tried to recreate ancient lighting using mirrors or flame-based methods, the results were disappointing. Dim, smoky, impractical. Which brings us to an uncomfortable comparison. In Iraq, archaeologists uncovered the so-called Baghdad battery, a clay vessel with a copper cylinder and iron rod. Fill it with an acidic liquid, and it generates voltage. If basic electrical cells existed in Mesopotamia, is it impossible that Egypt understood something similar? As interest in the Dendera images grew in the late 20th century, access quietly shrank. The chamber became restricted. High-resolution photographs vanished from public archives. A German documentary that filmed the reliefs in detail was suddenly pulled from broadcast. Researchers who openly discussed ancient Egyptian technology found funding disappear. The explanation hardened overnight. Mythological. Symbolic. End of discussion. But questions remained. Satellite imaging later revealed faint linear patterns beneath the sands near Dendera, shapes resembling organized infrastructure. There are persistent rumors of sealed chambers beneath the temple, off-limits even to local archaeologists. Stories circulate of copper coils, crystalline components, devices never shown to the public. No proof has surfaced, only silence. Because if the Dendera light wasn't symbolic, if it was functional, then ancient Egypt wasn't just a civilization of stone and ritual. It was a culture that understood energy. And that leads to a far more unsettling question. Why illuminate hidden chambers dedicated to resurrection and gods? What needed to be seen? And who was that light really for? The Han Dynasty Propulsion Scroll. In the year 32 CE, during the reign of Emperor Guangwu of the Eastern Han Dynasty, a strange document was said to arrive at the imperial court. It wasn't a poem. It wasn't a myth. It was a technical treatise, known as the Ji Qi Ji Luan, often translated as Treatise on Engine Principles. The scroll was attributed to a reclusive inventor named Kong Shun, and according to court records, it described something impossible for its time. A flying chariot, not pulled by animals, not lifted by magic, but powered by wind, captured, compressed, and redirected through curved metal channels. Officials reportedly dismissed it as allegory, a thought experiment. The scroll was archived and then vanished for nearly 2,000 years, until the 1970s. During excavations of the Dunhuang Library caves, sealed chambers filled with forgotten manuscripts, researchers uncovered a damaged collection of texts. Among them was a fragmented version of Kong Shun's work. Much was missing, but what remained was unsettling. The surviving passages spoke of motion generated from within and spinning force that lifts the frame above the earth. Ink diagrams showed cylindrical structures fitted with rotating blades. To modern eyes, they looked disturbingly familiar. Unofficial reviews by aerospace engineers noted axial flow channels, air intakes, exhaust paths, features consistent with basic thrust and early propulsion theory. One partial illustration even showed a capsule-shaped craft with stabilizing fins and what appeared to be an ignition chamber. At first, Chinese academic circles reacted with excitement. The scroll was hailed as a remarkable example of early mechanical imagination. But that enthusiasm didn't last. Within a year, public discussion stopped. The manuscript was removed from display. Articles referencing its engineering implications were quietly deleted. Digital copies vanished from academic databases. Scholars who had commented on its significance retracted their statements, citing updated evaluations that were never shared. Access to the Dunhuang site was later restricted under heritage protection laws. Independent researchers were denied permits. There were reports, never officially confirmed, of military vehicles stationed nearby under the banner of preservation. Whispers followed. Some claimed a more complete version of the treatise had been relocated to a government research facility in Beijing. No denial, no confirmation, just silence. Because if the Ji Qi Ji Luan is genuine, it suggests something extraordinary. That ancient China may have explored propulsion concepts long before the industrial age. But that raises an impossible question. How could such ideas exist without materials capable of surviving heat, pressure, or combustion? Was Kong Shun simply a mind centuries ahead of his time? Or was he working from knowledge that didn't originate in his era? One surviving line from the scroll lingers in the memory of those who've seen it. The bird does not ask the sky how to fly. It knows, because something whispered to it long ago. And if that whisper was real, where did it come from? The Greek Lens Manuscript. In 1896, beneath the sunlit ruins of Delos, archaeologists stumbled into what remained of a forgotten underground library. Collapsed stone, broken shelves, centuries of dust, and among the debris, one fragmented scroll. Written in Doric Greek, the document initially appeared philosophical, a meditation on vision, on how humans perceive reality. It was labeled the Optican Treatise. But as scholars read deeper, the tone changed. The text described shaping light using curved crystal surfaces to reveal objects concealed by distance. Not metaphorically, mechanically. It spoke of magnifying what the naked eye could not reach. In plain terms, a lens. Not a decorative gem, not a reading aid. A device for long-range observation. That alone breaks the timeline. The telescope, as history tells it, appears in the early 1600s with Hans Lippershey, nearly 2,000 years after this scroll was written. Yet the Optican Treatise goes further. It explains refraction, defines focal length, lists polishing angles with mathematical precision. Diagrams show hollow tubes fitted with multiple lenses. One sketch even depicts a mounted apparatus, stabilized on a tripod-like base, aimed unmistakably at the night sky. When the manuscript was presented to the Hellenic Academy in Athens in 1901, reactions were electric. Some compared it to the Antikythera mechanism, another Greek artifact that shouldn't exist. But unlike that bronze machine, the Opticon treatise vanished. Within months, it was recalled for reauthentication. Public discussion stopped. Records went quiet. Scholars who had examined the scroll were instructed not to publish further findings. The manuscript never returned to Delos. According to unofficial accounts from museum staff, it was transported under military escort to an undisclosed location, classified as a matter of national interest. Early photographs were removed from academic archives. A linguist who attempted a full translation was sued for unauthorized use of protected material, even though the document was never formally listed as protected. Then there's what was found beside the scroll. Clear quartz fragments, carefully shaped, ground with unusual symmetry. A leaked spectral analysis from a private lab suggested the quartz had been formed using controlled heat, far more precise than typical ancient stonework. Even more troubling, the curvature of the shards matched the lens specifications drawn in the manuscript, which raises a staggering possibility. If the Greeks possessed not only optical theory, but the ability to manufacture telescopic lenses, then figures like Euclid or Pythagoras may have observed the heavens in ways we never imagined. Jupiter's moons, planetary motion, details Galileo wouldn't record for another millennium. What knowledge might have flowed from those observations? What beliefs were shaped, then lost? Or was the Opticon treatise itself a copy, passed down from a civilization even older, preserving tools born not from discovery, but remembrance? Because one thing is clear. Someone decided humanity wasn't meant to look that far, that early, into the stars. The Sumerian sky charts. In 1880, amid the scorched ruins of the ancient city of Sippar, archaeologists uncovered a cluster of clay tablets buried beneath ash and collapsed stone. Most were routine records, inventories, rituals, transactions. One was different. Catalogued as tablet K.8538, it wasn't remarkable for its size, but for its precision. Pressed into the clay was a circular diagram, divided into clean segments, marked with celestial symbols and careful numerical notations. When translated, the meaning became clear. It was a map of the night sky, but not the sky of the ancient world. This chart didn't match what someone in 2000 BCE should have seen with the naked eye. It matched ours. Star positions aligned with modern astronomical models. Planetary paths were plotted with unsettling accuracy. And then there was a reference to something impossible. A dark wanderer moving beyond Saturn. A body with a slow, distant cycle. One that completes its path every 248 years. That number is uncomfortably familiar. It matches Pluto's orbital period. Pluto wouldn't be officially discovered until 1930. Yet here it was, recorded in baked clay nearly 4,000 years earlier. Even more disturbing, the tablet included corrections for retrograde motion, adjustments only necessary if you're tracking planets over time with magnification. But the Sumerians had no telescopes, no lenses, no known optical instruments. At least, none that survived. At first, scholars tried to explain it away. Ceremonial symbolism, astrological myth. Then computational astronomers stepped in. Using modern software, they reconstructed the sky chart. The positions matched a specific date with razor precision. June 29, 2024 BCE. That left only two options. Either the Sumerians achieved astronomical mastery far beyond anything we believe possible, or they inherited knowledge from a source we no longer remember. Shortly after these findings gained attention, access to the tablet changed. It was removed from the British Museum's public collection and transferred to an off-site archive for preservation. High-resolution images disappeared from the database. A researcher attempting to recreate the chart in 3D received a cease and desist letter, citing misuse of sensitive cultural data. Satellite surveys of the Sippar region were halted under military directive. Local excavation teams were replaced by unnamed contractors. Residents later reported helicopters moving sealed crates under heavy guard. No explanations were given. Because if the Sumerian sky chart is genuine, it means ancient humans didn't just observe the heavens. They understood them. They tracked planetary cycles, predicted celestial motion, possibly monitored objects far beyond visible range. And that leads to the question no academic journal dares to print. What if the Sumerians didn't discover this knowledge? What if they were taught? And if so, by who or what? The Book of Enoch's Star Maps. In 1773, a Scottish explorer named James Bruce returned from Ethiopia, carrying something scholars believed no longer existed: 3 ancient manuscripts. Among them was a nearly complete version of the Book of Enoch, a text erased from most religious canons and presumed lost for centuries. Written in Guizi, the sacred language of Ethiopia, the manuscript was dense with visions, warnings, and cosmic journeys. At first glance, it read like theology, until scholars reached a section called the Book of the Heavenly Luminaries. That's where the tone shifts. Here, the heavens aren't symbolic. They're measured. Enoch describes the movement of the sun, moon, and stars with procedural clarity, as if following an instruction manual for the sky. He speaks of windows of heaven, where the sun enters and exits at precise points during solstices and equinoxes. Not metaphorical gates, but fixed positions. The stars are said to move in repeating cycles, 24 of them, each governed, regulated, restrained. To ancient readers, these overseers were angels. To modern eyes, they look more like placeholders for forces or mechanics. The text tracks daylight length through the year with mathematical consistency. Some calculations align the solar year to within a fraction of a day, accuracy that predates the Julian calendar by centuries. This isn't prophecy, it's astronomy. Then come the disturbing passages. Enoch describes wandering stars that fall from the sky. They strike the earth. They are bound beneath mountains. Traditionally, these are read as fallen angels. But there's another interpretation. Could these be eyewitness accounts of meteor impacts? Or objects that entered the atmosphere and didn't leave? One line describes a being who measured the vault of the heavens, using instruments not named, only implied. Another speaks of knowledge shown, not taught. If the Book of Enoch preserves ancient sky maps, real ones, then it means detailed astronomical knowledge once existed outside temples, laboratories, and universities. It lived in forbidden scripture, which may explain why the text was removed, suppressed, and labeled heretical for centuries. Because if Enoch's star maps are accurate, then ancient humans didn't just watch the sky. They were watching something move within it. And the next forbidden invention suggests that what they saw may have come much closer than we're told. The Tully Papyrus. Enoch's visions don't end with stars and calendars. They move deeper. He describes being shown the signs of the earth and the secrets of the sun, phrases that, today, echo concepts of geodesy and solar mechanics. Not worship, measurement. Then come the journeys through multiple heavens, layered realms, each with different rules of time, space, and energy. In one, time slows. In another, it fractures. In the highest, Enoch encounters a light so intense he cannot give it shape or name. To ancient readers, this was mysticism. To modern theorists, it sounds eerily like a primitive framework for higher dimensions, ideas that now live in equations about wormholes and layered realities. That may explain what happened next. Despite early acceptance among some Christian scholars, the Book of Enoch was excluded from both Jewish and Christian canons. Officially, for theological reasons. Unofficially, many admitted discomfort. The text spoke openly of beings descending from the sky, teaching humanity forbidden knowledge, the secrets of heaven. Translations slowed. Critical editions stalled. A UNESCO-backed digital preservation effort was suddenly defunded. One Ethiopian monk who guided researchers through ancient archives was later found dead near Lake Tana under unexplained circumstances. Today, the Book of Enoch exists in a strange limbo, acknowledged but never embraced. Because if Enoch wasn't hallucinating, Then he didn't imagine the sky. He remembered it. And that memory doesn't stand alone. In the 1930s, inside the Vatican Museum, an Egyptologist named Alberto Tully encountered a papyrus he couldn't afford to buy. So he copied it by hand. That transcription, now known as the Tully Papyrus, would ignite one of the most unsettling debates in Egyptology. The text claimed to be an official royal record from the reign of Pharaoh Thutmose III, around 1480 BCE. It described an event over Egypt's skies. A circle of fire. Not a metaphor. Not an omen. Multiple fiery disks appeared overhead. They moved silently. They glowed brighter than the sun. The text states they were more numerous than anything and stretched to the limits of the four supports of heaven. The king ordered scribes to document the phenomenon in the House of Life, Egypt's sacred state archive. This wasn't mythology. It was administration. The objects reportedly remained visible for days, then rose higher and drifted south. No interpretation was offered. No gods were named. Just a record of something seen. Modern readers immediately recognized the language. Unidentified aerial phenomena. Skeptics dismissed the papyrus outright. After all, the original was never recovered, only Tully's copy. But handwriting experts confirmed the transcription matched Tully's verified notes. Linguists found the structure consistent with official documents from the same dynasty. Requests to search Vatican archives for the original were denied. Tully died before publishing a full study. Years later, researcher Boris de Requilts claimed to have found Tully's notes and translations among his papers. Before they could be analyzed, they vanished during a private estate transfer. No institution has acknowledged receiving them. Today, the Tully Papyrus is labeled unverifiable folklore. And yet, its account mirrors reports found across cultures and centuries. Silent, luminous objects. Multiple witnesses. Carefully recorded. Then forgotten. The difference is this. The Tully Papyrus wasn't a legend. It was a royal chronicle. If it's authentic, it may be the earliest written record of a phenomenon that still appears in our skies today. Which leaves one final, chilling question. Who was watching Egypt at the height of its power? And why did they choose that moment to be seen? The Mayan codices and DNA symbols. Deep in the humid jungles of southern Mexico, where stone temples are slowly reclaimed by vines, only 3 pre-Columbian Mayan books survived the fires of conquest. The Dresden Codex, the Madrid Codex, the Paris Codex, fragile folding manuscripts made from bark cloth, covered in dense hieroglyphs and painted symbols. For decades, scholars admired them for one reason above all else: astronomy. The Maya mapped eclipses, tracked Venus, and calculated lunar cycles with precision that still humbles modern science. But recent high-resolution scans revealed something no one expected. Something biological. On several pages of the Dresden Codex, serpentine forms twist around a central axis. Not loosely, not chaotically. Precisely. They spiral upward in paired strands, mirroring the double helix structure of DNA. These shapes are surrounded by glyphs tied to life, rebirth, and creation itself. The Maya called it the weaving of existence. Even more unsettling are the figures shown interacting with these spirals. Humanoid beings appear to bind, adjust, or stabilize the strands using tools or threads. Imagery that looks eerily similar to modern illustrations of genetic manipulation. In one panel, 2 figures hold a coiled cord suspended between them. Its proportions, when scaled, match the turn of a DNA helix with astonishing accuracy. Skeptics insist these are symbols. Snakes, umbilical cords, cosmic spirals. But when researchers overlaid the artwork with molecular diagrams of nucleotides and base pair structures, the similarities became difficult to ignore, especially when viewed through mind belief. The Maya taught that humans were written into existence. That reality itself was composed using a sacred code. Creation, to them, was not spoken, it was inscribed. That belief becomes even stranger at Bonampak. Inside one chamber, a mural shows a human figure lying flat on a stone platform. Around him, others manipulate luminous strands or fluid beams emerging from his body. For years, It was labeled ritual sacrifice. But some now see something else. Modification, healing, experimentation. Academic institutions have pushed back hard. Proposals comparing codex imagery with molecular biology were rejected outright. High-resolution digital access to the manuscripts was restricted. Researchers who suggested biological interpretations found themselves isolated, dismissed as fringe. But the Mayan worldview refuses to fit inside modern boxes. To them, existence was vibration, frequency, sacred geometry. Their gods were not just creators. They were weavers of flesh. They stitched humanity together using threads of light. So the question lingers. What if these images aren't metaphor? What if, through altered consciousness or forgotten instruments, the Maya glimpsed the hidden architecture of life itself? If that's true, then the codices aren't myths. They're memories. A biological blueprint encoded in art, waiting for a future generation to finally recognize what it's looking at. The Nag Hammadi Scrolls. In 1945, near the Egyptian town of Nag Hammadi, a farmer digging for fertilizer struck something hollow, a sealed clay jar. Inside it were 13 leather-bound papyrus codices, hidden away for nearly 2,000 years. Written in Coptic and dated to the 3rd and 4th centuries, these texts contain gospels that were never meant to survive. Not lost, buried. Their contents directly challenged the foundations of reality itself. These writings told alternative stories of creation, consciousness, and existence, accounts that sharply contradicted the canonical Bible. Among them were chilling references to beings called archons, not angels, not demons, but architects, reality engineers. According to one text, the Apocryphon of John, the world we inhabit was not created by a benevolent God. It was fabricated, constructed by a false creator, an imposter intelligence that built the material universe as a containment system for consciousness. Humanity, the text claims, is trapped inside an imitation world, a realm designed to distract, confuse, and drain awareness. The true divine source, called only the invisible spirit, exists beyond space, time, and perception, unreachable through ordinary senses. The scrolls describe layers of illusion stacked upon one another, projections mistaken for truth, a veil known as the How that blinds human awareness from seeing beyond the structure. The archons are described as masters of counterfeit reality, capable of fabricating entire lifetimes of illusion, complete with memory, identity, and fear. The only escape, the texts say, is gnosis, not belief, not obedience, direct inner knowing, awakening through realization. Language like this feels unsettlingly modern. Simulation, perception layers, artificial worlds, non-human intelligences, concepts now debated in quantum physics, neuroscience, and the simulation hypothesis appear here, written nearly 2 millennia ago. These ideas were too dangerous to survive openly. By the 4th century, Gnostic teachings were declared heresy. Their libraries were destroyed, their followers erased. The Nag Hammadi scrolls survived only because someone knew enough to hide them underground. Even after their rediscovery, access was tightly controlled. For decades, only a handful of approved scholars were allowed to study them. Translations were delayed. Some texts weren't released to the public until the 1990s. Official explanations called it academic caution. Others suspected suppression. To this day, interpretations remain divided. Mainstream theology frames the texts as metaphor. Alternative researchers insist they are literal warnings, left behind by a forgotten elite who saw something they weren't supposed to see. The language doesn't read like myth. It reads like a manual, an instruction set for recognizing deception. So the question remains, what if the Gnostics weren't mystics lost in abstraction? What if they were early observers of reality's mechanics? What if they were describing what we now call simulated universes, non-human overseers, and consciousness entrapment? If so, these weren't stories. They were instructions, and they were buried on purpose. Because if the Apocryphon of John is right, then the world around us isn't merely misunderstood. It's constructed, and whoever built it never intended for us to question the design. These 10 forbidden texts, scattered across continents and centuries, form more than a list of strange anomalies. They reveal a pattern, a hidden architecture of knowledge. From ancient tablets that mapped planetary motion, to codices that resemble biological blueprints, to scrolls that warn of synthetic realities, each fragment points to the same conclusion. Advanced understanding existed where it shouldn't have. Atomic theory in sacred hymns, electric light in temple reliefs, DNA encoded in ancient art, telescopic vision before telescopes, and a simulated cosmos hidden inside suppressed gospels. These are not isolated sparks of genius. They are echoes of something older, something systematically dismantled. And whenever these ideas surface, the response is always the same. Silence, restrictions, reclassification, funding withdrawn, access denied, museums lock drawers, translations stall. The eraser moves quietly, without a name. If these texts are true, we didn't just lose stories. We lost possibilities. Possibilities that ancient civilizations understood energy, biology, and consciousness far beyond what history allows. Possibilities that humanity is not the first, nor the only, to question the nature of reality. Each hidden manuscript diverts a timeline. Each silenced idea erases a future. Yet pieces remain, buried beneath deserts, sealed inside walls, encoded in symbols no one fully understands. They are not waiting to be discovered. They are waiting to be remembered. Because perhaps the real danger isn't that these ancient writings contain lies. It's that they contain far too much truth. If the past hides truths we were never meant to see, shouldn't we uncover them? Join Strange Wise and step beyond the official story. Explore the forbidden manuscripts, the lost technologies, and the mysteries they whisper. Subscribe now, hit the bell, and dare to question everything you thought you knew. The truth is waiting. Are you ready to remember it?